Ctaps are a technique that can get just a little more power out of your rocket jumps. There's already a ton of tutorials that can teach you how to Ctap, but I've found that none of them are sufficiently clear and comprehensive. Before we get started, it's worth thinking for a second about whether it's worth learning Ctaps yet. Most jumpers would do better learning how to consistently get very powerful regular rocket jumps. Ctaps are very rarely required for any jumps and jump maps. All but a small few particularly hard maps can be done without Ctapping, and even most of the maps that intended for you to use them have workarounds. As for competitive play, I'm no expert in that realm, but I suspect that the small amount of extra jumps that you unlock by Ctapping aren't worth the practice required to get consistent with these, at least at most levels of play. If you're still here, here's how to Ctap. Press crouch, then release it before you're fully crouched. Then, while you're still uncrouching, jump. When this happens, you're low to the floor and funky source wizardry puts your hitboxes close to a rocket that you shoot. Before we add the rocket though, let's make sure this first part is correct. You can actually tell if you're doing a Ctap jump instead of a regular jump because you don't jump as high when you Ctap. You won't go up some platforms such as the tables on the Academy Classic map, and you'll see a different part of a texture that you're looking at if you're staring at a wall as you practice. So, to do a Ctap rocket jump, do the Ctap inputs and time the rocket with your jump just as you would during a regular rocket jump. This is another reason why it's so important to be consistent at getting very powerful regular rocket jumps before learning Ctaps. If you're practicing Ctaps, it'll be so much harder to get that timing tight, partially because you're confounded with more inputs, and partially because you can get away with sloppier timing because your jumps are a bit higher. Another thing, yes, you are timing the rocket with your jump. You're done pressing crouch. For whatever reason, the voodoo that you perform before jumping already takes care of what you would normally need to do by having crouch held when you get hit by a rocket. This doesn't last forever though, so if you're doing a Ctap into wall shots for example, start holding crouch again before you shoot your second rocket. Remember, to Ctap, crouch partially, and then while partially uncrouched, jump and shoot. Let's get into detail about this crouching stuff. The timing on the crouch and uncrouch doesn't affect your power, but it's important that you're uncrouching when you jump. If you hold crouch longer, the uncrouching period lasts longer. This means that crouching longer has the major benefit of giving you a wider timing window, which makes it easier to execute, both because you don't need to jump right away, and because you don't need to press everything so fast. However, there's a couple downsides too. If you crouch a little too long, you won't be able to jump during the uncrouch, so you can only extend the crouch input for so long. Moreover, because you're spending more time on the ground crouching and uncrouching, you don't jump as fast. This can be a serious downside if you're playing competitively, speedrunning a map, or trying to Ctap quickly for a sync. Another note on crouching with Ctaps, remember that you don't want to have crouch held when you shoot yourself with your first rocket. When first learning to do Ctap rocket jumps, I suggest you do long, deep crouches so you have the biggest window in timing that you can. It's very easy to think that you're uncrouching early enough, but are actually shooting and jumping before you release crouch. If you instead do these slow crouches, you can be confident that you've released crouch before you jump and shoot. It's very obvious when you waited to shoot until it's too late, because you'll end up doing a rocket jump without crouch and not go high at all. But if you go too early and do a tight rocket jump, you can get into head games with yourself about what went wrong with your timing. Did you jump at the right time but shoot a little late? Or did you do jump and shoot timed well with each other, but both a little early? The difference between a powerful regular rocket jump and a weak Ctap can be hard to distinguish. Now let's talk about maximizing height and distance. People will talk about getting a 691 Ctap, which refers to 691 hammer units, the maximum height that you can cover with a Ctap. For stock, you can magically achieve a 691 Ctap by walking to the right with D, and max distance by walking left with A. This is because your rocket will end up right under you, or just the right amount behind you. With the original, you can walk forwards or be standing still when you start a Ctap that's trying to achieve those juicy 691 hammer units. For distance with the original, however, it's harder to get as far because you need to aim your rocket in just the right spot behind you. Even worse, the original is literally incapable of going quite as far as stock can, by 3 hammer units. It's worth mentioning that Ctaps don't always help. If you Ctap a shot off of a wall, well, you could have just done a crouch shot and gone the same distance easier. Similarly, water jumps and water sinks won't send you further when you Ctap, but you will have a slightly bigger timing window for max height water sinks if you Ctap. So for some people who have their Ctaps down well, that benefit may be worth it. Ctapping sinks can gain height too, but they're a real challenge since you need to start the Ctap inputs before the rocket arrives. If you want to Ctap your sinks, you should start by getting quite good at both Ctaps and sinks separately. A good piece of knowledge to have is that you can only go so high from one sink, since TF2 has a speed limit of 3,500 hammer units per second in each coordinate direction. Because of this, a Quint can reach max height without a Ctap, though a Ctap can get you there more easily. A perfect Ctap quad doesn't quite achieve this height, but it comes fairly close. Ctaps can really mess with your muscle memory, so they take a lot of repetition to become comfortable. This is especially true when you want to do Ctaps fluidly with other motions, since you'll need to change where you're looking and the keys that you're pressing, all while doing this crouch-uncrouch thing. Ctapping in time with a bundle for a sink will require you to look up and down when you Ctap, which can also mess with your muscle memory. I suggest that you try practicing Ctaps in all sorts of different orientations and situations, so that you're not caught off guard when you need to do one in a new way. To put these into practice, it's important to be able to test yourself on the technique in various situations. Knowing that different jumps are impossible with a normal crouch jump, but possible with Ctaps, can be very useful in giving you different opportunities to practice. Aside from these places in Jump Academy 2 and Classic, there are a couple of maps which are dedicated to Ctaps. Manitou is a T5 map that features simple but very tight jumps, which, without cheating the jump, each require a Ctap. Tap Dance is a T6 Ctap map, which has more developed jumps and sinks, and very importantly for our purposes, features an incredibly well-built Ctap practice room, with various gaps and features that will test if you're doing a Ctap without rockets correctly, if your Ctaps with rockets are getting the height or distance that you want, and various Ctap sync heights and distances. I'm not sure any other jumping technique has such a thorough dedicated practice area. Hopefully this clears up a lot about Ctap rocket jumping. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.